So we're going to get started. Hi everyone. It's good to see you guys. My name is Dina Schick. I am from Carnegie Mellon, the CERT Coordination Center. I gave the first talk of the 101 track. I'm here to moderate our panel of lovely panelists here today for the 101. I want you guys to think of this less as a formal panel. Maybe you've seen, I know DerbyCon is probably like one of the most popular panels that we've seen in the last couple years. I want this to be about you guys. So please, this is your time to ask questions of the panelists. I don't want this just to be me asking the questions, so please take this opportunity and dig into some of the topics that our panelists have talked about between yesterday and today. They're going to go down the line and introduce themselves and give a 5-ish minute briefing of what they talked about, just so we all know if you weren't in these sessions. So.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take less than 5 minutes because I like to do things efficiently. My name is Charles Tango. I'm the CISO for Altria. I've been with the company about 3 years. I've been in Richmond about 3 years. Prior to that, my background in security has been in financial services, Citibank, another regional bank based out of New York. So relatively new to the area, love it down here. And before that, I worked for a number of technology startups in Silicon Valley. I've been in security since I was about 18, so I've been doing this for a while. That's obviously something that I care about immensely. Besides being the CISO for Altria, I sit on a few boards and advisory boards, some local to Richmond, some national, some startup companies as well. So honestly, more than anything else, it helps me keep aware of what's going on in the industry. The talk that I gave today was one that I entirely made up, and it was really something that I feel passionate about in my role as a CISO and trying to balance security and risk management. And the topic was that risk management and security are not necessarily equal. They often serve two different goals, two different objectives. You can look at the same scenario and make one decision when you're trying to secure the organization and make an entirely different decision when you're trying to manage a risk for the organization. So we walk through that in a real-world scenario that happens to me on a daily basis. And the criteria and the methodology that I use, without getting into any numbers, anything like that, just entirely subjective criteria, qualitative criteria that I use to determine what the risk of the options are and which one I would recommend the business taking, and then the steps that I would walk through for that process. And ultimately, I'd like to think that I convinced the audience that they are, in fact, two different things. They achieve different objectives, but they can work together. So thank you very much.
I'm Rick Well. I'm the lead security consultant at SciComm. My presentation today was a Network 101. It was Network and Network Security 101 presentation. I talked about some of the basics of networking. We kind of stepped through the OSI model. We talked about some things to protect your network, the actual devices themselves. And then we pivoted into network security and touched on a couple of security technologies and methodologies that are commonly seen, and at the end tied it back to your risk and your overall security program and how you approach securing the foundation that is the network.
My name is Barry Coons. I made a presentation this morning, and it was titled Risk Assessment, the Heart of Risk-Based Security. Could also be the heart of information security. It's all about knowing your assets, your threats and vulnerabilities, coming up with a qualitative risk score so you can prioritize the spending of your limited money. And I try to kind of walk you through a mechanism, methodology that you can really do with a pencil and a paper or Excel spreadsheet and understand. So at the end of the process, you have a sense of what your risks are and you spent your money wisely. That's right.
All right. My name is David Sullivan. I was the guy walking around in the Jedi robes yesterday. I gave a talk. Well, first I work for a company called Campus Guard. We do all kinds of consultant services for compliance and risk assessments and pen testing and phishing and all that kind of stuff. Previously, I worked for a couple different agencies with the state of Virginia, doing incident response and pen testing there as well. But my talk yesterday was around the difference between vulnerability assessments, scanning, and penetration testing, and even touched on red teaming a little bit too. The difference between those terms, how to get the most out of your vulnerability assessments, your penetration tests, your red team exercises, and how to best spend your money and not get sold on snake oil. So that's what I talked about, and had a lot of Star Wars references as well, because I love Star Wars. So if you want to talk about Star Wars, I'm here all day.
What was the worst episode?
The Last Jedi.
Judge Blinks or whatever his name is?
Oh, Jar Jar Binks?
Yeah, wasn't that the worst one?
No, he wasn't the worst. I really didn't like The Last Jedi.
Okay.
We can save those ones.
Any other Star Wars questions?
We can also talk Game of Thrones if anybody else is interested.
Oh, God, don't get me started.
You'll have
Don't get me
opinions.
started.
Okay, any questions from the audience to kick it off? You guys are
I'll start.
start.
So this is actually a question to Charles. There was a talk yesterday from Markel about cyber insurance policy.
Yep.
And a lot of CISOs and officers of companies are reluctant to kind of bring that to kind of a topic for the board of directors because it's a bad reflection of that they're not doing their job. Two questions I have. Does Altria have a cyber insurance policy? And if so, was that something that was implemented as part of your tenure at Altria?
So yes and no. Yes, we have one. No, it was not implemented by me. It was implemented well before me. I would say I'm kind of surprised. I didn't see that presentation. I'm kind of surprised by that statement. I would say that amongst my peer group, it is something we're expected to do. It's not even, we wouldn't view it as a poor reflection. We would actually view not talking about it as a negative. In fact, the NACD, which is the guidelines for corporate directors of a board, specifically includes what questions board members should ask CISOs. I think they give you the cheat sheet. And one of the questions is explicitly, how much cyber insurance do we have? So I wouldn't view it as a negative at all. I would view it as just part of my job to talk about that. And every year we do an analysis on whether or not it's right-sized, and we let the board know.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know if anybody else has a perspective on that.
Same, agreed, 100%.
Okay?
I do have another question, and thank you for asking that, because I missed that cyber insurance one. I know I wanted to see it. Just out of curiosity, because I work for a state government, right? And cyber insurance, now, would that even be a factor in a government website?
That's a question for an insurance adjuster, probably. I don't know
I'm
if
just just asking about like your experience in the field. Have you seen very many government-type clients?
I'm sure there are definitely policies that can be written for governments for other topics, so I don't see why it wouldn't apply to cyber. I will say that even a cyber policy that we have only protects very specific aspects of a breach. I mean, some people go into it thinking, all right, I have insurance, after I hit the deductible, I'm good.
Right.
It doesn't cover your entire breach. It covers very specific aspects of a breach. I would assume the same thing would apply there, but that's
We're looking
speculation.
at a lot of PII, so
Yep.
that's the specific thing that I'm like, yeah. So
And I'll just say, as a former government employee, those cyber insurance things are very expensive because you are most likely in an agency responsible for the entire state. So you're carrying a lot of data, and that's going to be an expensive policy. And government agencies don't always have the budget for that, so that's a tough one.
I have a question. Can a consumer, whom I'm assuming you have my data, can I sue you as a government entity if you
Unfortunately not,
breach?
probably. They probably have sovereign immunity.
And no, to
That's
be
what I'm
honest
thinking.
with you, I would say the government, from my perspective, I would say the government's open season. I would say, hey, deep pockets, go for them. So unless somebody can say, unless somebody can show that they've got like adequate protections on it, and at the very least, someone's going to lose their job, there's going to be some kind of a,
Municipalities are sued on any given day for any number of topics.
Right,
I don't know why
exactly.
it wouldn't apply also to cyber.
Exactly.
Again,
I mean, you can,
don't know.
I really, I guess the bottom line is you can sue anybody. The question is, are you actually going to be able to get a ruling in your favor and then be able to collect?
Yeah,
So
that's
if, you know,
fair.
if I'm Rick the taxpayer of the state of Virginia, if Vita does something wrong, I'm probably out of luck, honestly.
it's like, what's the...
I would say if you moved to California, you could do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but then you have to live in California. Who's going to do that?
Risk reward.
See? Exactly.
I have a question. From your perspective, as you know, internet usage continues to migrate. And back when I was a kid, we didn't have any of this stuff. But nowadays, kids are born into it and they have it as early as 1-year-old. Do you see the vulnerability and security risk on the common user starting to switch as more and more young people come into the workforce who are already, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and they've had these things in their hands for 5-6 years? And maybe will that in turn put more of the security risk onto vulnerabilities and other things that we better control? And the reason I ask that is we spend so much money on reactionary and detection, and it's always, it's almost like we can't hit the user base where we need to be.
Well, just because someone uses a computer doesn't mean they have awareness of security topics. So I have 2 kids, I have 2 boys. They have no concept of security hygiene, no matter what happens. And as much as they need to know is they can ask me why the internet is down. I mean, it is every bad user story you can possibly imagine wrapped up in somebody who not only doesn't understand, but isn't interested to hear an answer longer than about 6 words. So, what's amazing to me is my oldest is in middle school, so he was issued a Chromebook. He is responsible for that asset, issued by the county school system that we live in. Okay, the parents were told by a technology coordinator, I guess, this is it. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to tell you how to get help with it, and I hope it works for you. So not only is it's a Chromebook, so it can only go so wrong right now. Now, what's it going to look like in 5 or 6 years when every attacker in the universe realizes, hey, everybody, every kid in America has a Chromebook. I should take a look at that. So I mean, as an example, Barry's firm, RVAsec here, they're like, oh, we've got a bunch of vulnerabilities that aren't published in CVEs. So what's lurking out there that we don't know about? I mean, that's one of the things. The place I came from was a health system. We had medical devices all over the place, huge amounts of risk attached there. What the impact was if something went wrong, kind of depends. So, and again, our average healthcare worker, very, very much in tune with patient care, security awareness, not so much. So even though they're going to get exposed to technology at an earlier age, that doesn't mean they're getting the awareness. I mean, my kids aren't watching security briefing videos on YouTube. They're not doing that. Maybe if they were doing that, that'd be good. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change stuff around so when they try YouTube, they get like DEF CON briefings. I'm doing that next time. That's a great idea.
Follow-up question real quick. Do you think companies should start having a responsibility to where the people that they're onboarding have to have a certain degree of security awareness? I mean, when does the shift come to that? Because right now, it's about how well can you do whatever we're hiring you for, but it's not about how well can you do whatever we're hiring for. Oh, have you ever used a computer?
Well, if I was king, and I'll say this before these executives can talk, because I'm an engineer and I don't care. So if I was king, the answer would be yes.
I'm used to it.
I want to know what level of awareness and understanding they have before I put them in front of my data and my assets. Like I said, that's an engineer talking, because I think we should use more sticks. But again, I'm an engineer. I am not I'm not an executive. I break bones in my body putting gear in, so I'm probably not the person to ask for a good feeling answer.
Oh, you want me to give you a good feeling?
Yes. Yes.
So I see it as my obligation to make sure when somebody walks through that door that I give them the training they need to be at least basically cyber aware. But in my opinion, the issue is actually more of a societal problem. I think it's getting worse instead of better. I think 20 years ago, in order to make technology work, we all had to understand it to a certain level. And at this point, we've made it so easy that you don't need to understand it. It just magically works. And when things magically work, you don't know what's behind the scenes on it. And
The world keeps making a better fool.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but I see it as my obligation, right, to make sure that the person who walks through that door has a basic understanding of cybersecurity. And if they don't, it's my fault.
And I'll just add to that as well, as someone who's coming from an offensive mindset and who works with a lot of higher education, we deal with students, younger people who've dealt with technology their whole life. Their passwords are just as bad as the people who've been using the same password for 20 years. We commonly get student passwords. Students also like to use Reddit, and a lot of colleges have their own Reddit pages, and so there's a treasure trove of internal information that should not be publicly available that students are posting on Reddit. So I don't think growing up with this technology, growing up with a security mindset is a big thing right now, because we're constantly finding that stuff. I actually think the older generation has a better perspective on the privacy, and the younger generation just doesn't really care that much about privacy because their whole lives are already out on the internet. So they're exposing internal company assets, I think, worse than the older generations are.
Is he talking about me?
You're one of the good ones.
Really good. I couldn't echo any more of what these guys say. Trying to run an organization, my assets, my rules before you get it, before you get access to it. And I'll even go a step further, and I'll have to say that my son Jake tells me this will never work, but I get irritated when I read all these reports about these bots, and these idiot neighbors I have who don't protect their computers, and their computers are used to attack all of us. It really enrages me. And then I think, wait a minute, we should require the ISPs to run a scan on these idiot computers before they allow them to get hooked to the internet. Because why is it that we allow someone else's incompetence, ignorance, or whatever to put us all in danger? Why we do that? And it just drives me crazy. Now, I'm told that I can't do that, but that's what I would do. And I hold the ISPs responsible for allowing a susceptible, vulnerable computer to be used as something that infects all of us.
Well,
what do you think?
But who has the liability? I mean, this is the funny thing. So you buy a piece of software. You ever read a EULA?
It says we give you nothing but the software.
It's your
Exactly.
expense.
It says there is no warranty, there is no guarantee. It's probably the only product in the universe that's like that. If you buy a toaster at Walmart for $10, there's a warranty there. But yet you buy a piece of software, like how much does SAP cost for ERP? And how often do you see in the news how a SAP implementation went wrong? Like it's not a unique event, but it's like, well, we're sorry.
If you get that.
So it'd be great if we could figure out some way to attach liability to folks who don't patch their stuff at home, or it's like, well, I got this old computer that runs some version of Windows, I'm not even sure, and somebody has installed the low orbit ion cannon on it, and they're smoking some poor guy's website for $1 million or something. Yes, if we could figure out a way to do the liability, okay. But part of it is, do I trust my providers? I mean, I know who the home internet is provider where I live, and I barely trust them to be able to drink water unassisted because they're wretchedly bad. So it'd be great.
So next year there's going to be a presentation in the Darwinian approach to security.
I think we ought to come, the stick. We ought to have the stick presentation.
Write that down.
So I come from Comcast.
It's actually not you. Amazingly enough, it's not you.
This
On the
time.
business service side, and
Well, then maybe it is you.
we have a real demarcation issue where we're not going to get involved with your computer, we're just going to hook it up. So from the get-go, we don't want to take responsibility for anything that's wrong with your computer. And in the residential side, we started giving free antiviruses 10, 15 years ago to make sure that everyone who's at least got AV running, or we don't even install it for them, they have the opportunity to install it for free. So it's not a great scenario.
No. But, bring it up, one more point on that, and then I'll release here. It's all about the liability, the risk, right? And what risk does SAP have or Microsoft have in releasing vulnerable software?
None.
None. What risk do they have if they don't release it on time? Ooh, now we're talking about the real deal, right? Money and this and all that. So until there's some penalty, liability, or consequence for bad behavior, you're just going to get more bad behavior quicker. It's just going to happen quicker because we've come to accept, 22,000 more, additional vulnerabilities last year alone. What the hell? It doesn't matter. We don't seem to care.
Yeah, well, why
Even activist
test?
panel.
What do you have customers
Yes,
for?
that's
right. Exactly. I mean, it's just the penalty isn't there, in my view, for the get the right behavior.
Questions from the
Let's change the topic.
Equifax is breached. How are they still in business?
They might as well have had Sullivan immunity. I mean, that's the funniest thing is watching that from the outside, certainly in. Like a train wreck happened in slow motion. And at the end of the day, we got lots of sound bites. Nobody really cared about taking action. So you would think to yourself, well, why would this private firm not be held accountable? And I think the cynical view might suggest that there are certain levels of the government as well. We have to leverage them for intelligence feeds, and we can't afford for them to go away.
Interesting point. You bring up Equifax. They're the three credit bureaus, right? We got Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, right? Do you know who the #1 breached entity in the world is? Meaning in terms of the number of individual breaches? You want to guess? It's not Equifax. It's Experian. 120 times have they been breached. The only difference between them and Equifax, it's 5 here, 10 here, 20 here, 30 here. Not how many million was Equifax. So they got thrown on top of the bad hopper. But have you seen these Experian commercials where they want you to give them even more information so they can investigate you on the dark web? I mean, give me a break. And who did Equifax? Oh, we'll provide you free identity theft management. What? I mean, this is a complete and utter joke. But you're right. There doesn't seem to be any real consequences for this stuff.
So I'll add something, but I'm not going to say much of this intentionally. I would say that it's easy to judge and speculate from the outside. Understand that when these things occur, most information is never released.
What was that?
Most information is never released as far as what actually occurred.
Oh, yeah. Full disclosure of what happened, yeah.
Yes.
And what it was, yeah.
And that is intentional. Not just by the company, sometimes by the government. So I would not be quick to judge the organization from the outside, having been on the other side of those equations.
That might be a hard case to sell, because being on the outside looking in, one, why did it take you 18 months to discover you were breached? And then why did it take another 6 months for you to tell us? Especially if your target and Christmas season is right there. I mean, a lot of this smells really bad, and I don't have any confidence in you as a company. I mean, that's just me as a normal consumer, because you're right. There's a lot going on. In fact, of the 40,000 breaches that we've collected, a surprising 30 or more % of them, the company reports unknown number of records breached. Now, you know damn good and well they know the number, but they just don't tell us.
Well, they actually might not know.
Well, that's even worse.
There are definitely cases where you don't know.
That's even worse.
Well,
There are
to me.
cases
But
where...
I agree with you. That's even worse to me as you protecting my data. Really?
so sometimes it's not so much that they're protecting it as it is they just happen to have it. So
You hear this?
this is because before it
You just
became,
happen to have it, but you have no obligation to protect it? That's not what you're saying.
it's almost there. Well, so before I became a consultant, I worked kind of in the places like where Charles is working on the inside, and you see things. In a lot of cases, you have legacy systems. Who knows that? Well, Joe knows that, but he's been retired 5 years. Well, why do we still have this? Well, we are legally obligated to maintain this because reasons. Coming from healthcare, what we found out was we had to maintain patient records for children that had been born in our hospitals until they were 18. Well, how many medical information systems do you think they had records in, first thing? And, the system that I had in 1979 is not the system that I had in 1999, and it's certainly not the system that I have now in 2018. So even like my kids who were born not that long ago, I know the EMR has changed at least twice. But yet, they still have to hold on to that data. In a lot of cases, the data isn't exportable. So you end up with these silos of stuff. And go back to your risk assessment talk.
Yeah.
What do you have? What's the asset? And do we actually know about it? When MedStar got breached, I guess now it's been 3 years ago, they got breached through a JBoss server that they did not know existed. So, like in some cases, not so many, they have their stuff. It's almost like they have my stuff on accident. Like Equifax and TransUnion, those guys are a little different because they kind of vacuum that stuff up on purpose. But other places like Target, they have them because they're a retail place. They kind of got it because their business is selling you stuff. It wasn't like they came out and said, "Hey, give us your information and we'll do something."
It's just a product of doing business, sure.
Yeah.
So I have a question, just going off the Equifax thing. So Equifax was hosted by an Apache Struts ball, right? It was pretty well known. Why do you think organizations are not doing as well as they could be with vulnerability management?
Do you think it's easy?
Well, I'm asking, what are the
So-
challenges that you're seeing?
So I'll give you context for my time at Citibank. Right? The Citibank, when I worked at Citibank, had about 450,000 employees. You know how many endpoints we had? Millions.
Yep.
When you had a 0 day of that level, 100% patching was not the objective. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. When you start talking about that order of magnitude, getting to 0 is not the objective. It's getting it as low as possible. And what Equifax saw is it only takes one. And we all know that. Theoretically, it only takes one. And it only took one in Equifax. One system. That doesn't mean it wasn't patched in other places. It was. It's one system.
Well, that's the thing of defensive security. You have to be right every time. The guy who's trying to get you or the lady's trying to get you, they have to be right once. I mean, it's like the fingers in the dike thing. Every time the little stream of water comes out, you go, and eventually you run out of fingers. You go, well, what do we do? Well, I don't know. Grow more fingers, I guess. That seems to be the solution generally. It's vulnerability management, patch management, so on and so forth. Well, we're still not doing all that hot. Generally as an industry, there's plenty of places that I go talk to. Let's run a vuln scan. Okay. Oh, you're missing patches from 6 years ago. Okay. I mean, they can only be as good as they can be. And to Charles's point, at a certain scale, you probably can't get to 0. I mean, you probably could get to 0 for that patch when you retired all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when it was live, probably weren't going to get there.
And usually the effort in tracking, you get to a reasonable threshold of completion before it starts becoming more of a business as usual process instead of an event that you're trying to patch that. And it's the way you have to look at it. When you have millions of endpoints, attempting to test across millions of endpoints is not an easy task. And if somebody invents a way to do that, they're going to be a billionaire. So please let me know. It's not an easy task.
Please let us all know.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not feeling real confident here.
Okay, I'm gonna go down the line, starting at top 1, 2, 3. Go ahead.
So along the line of, I guess, patching and getting to that 0 number, is that not something today that is possible with today's automation? I guess what really are the challenges when you have those millions of endpoints?
It's easy to apply a patch. It's not easy to know if that patch that was applied broke anything else on the system. And across 1 million endpoints, it's going to break some things. That's what it comes down to. We can apply patches all day long. Like, obviously, that technology exists.
Yeah.
And I just had this conversation with IT Ops 6 hours ago. We can apply patches all day long. Nobody needs to be around for it. But it's not as straightforward as that.
So I guess going along the same line, like trying to take some of the things that the DevOps and Dev community is using around like unit testing, kind of trying to figure that out, because the idea is typically you can take a system and you know exactly what a good known state looks like, and I can test for that object and then push it. I guess do you not see something on that scale being applied to millions of endpoints, or?
So when you're running, and I'll let these other people chime in too, but when you're running in a containerized system, things are a lot easier to do. You can spin, you're not worried about patching. You're creating a new image, spinning up a new image, and you're running off of that. That's great when you're in that environment. When you're running off of Windows XP and AS400s and these things that have been around for 20 years, it's a different conversation.
And I'll just add to that. I'll ask a question. How many people here work in an organization that knows 100% of their assets and where they are?
You can't.
So that's the number one problem right there. Asset management is terrible at every organization. So.
And the funny thing is, that's the number one CIS control.
Yep, that is the first thing you need to do.
That's number one.
Is asset management and knowing.
Impossible.
Yeah. And those are the systems that can be the ones that are missed on the asset management.
Or the
So.
ones that have been there for a long time, we forget about them.
Or we have no knowledge. I mean, to the point that was made from the audience, a containerized system, we just make a new one, we're good. The stuff that we just hope doesn't keel over on us, you're really stuck.
Yeah.
So we need a breakthrough of some sort, because I'm hearing we don't really know all the stuff. It's so big, we can't really do what we want to do to it.
It's probably next to that flying car.
And we need a step function here, just gradual improvement stuff ain't hacking it. Right?
You're right. So honestly, and this is an entirely different talk, and I've given parts of this talk somewhere else. This is the only industry that tries to solve the problem by making no problems. It really is, right? The example I give working in the banking world is when I was a CISO for a bank, if there was a breach and somebody lost money, the regulators would come in, they would fine us, and I would probably lose my job. Somebody goes to the branch down the street, says, I have a gun, give me money. Even if they don't have a gun, we hand over money, 30 seconds, the police show up, and now there's a manhunt for that person, right? Very different models. The physical security side is not attempting to prevent every single issue. They don't have metal detectors on every door. They're not trying to lock it down 100% because they know societally we have controls around what's going to happen when that does occur. We are working in this world where we're trying to fix everything. That's not going to work. There's going to be no technology, no AI that's going to fix that. We have to fix it a different way.
There's no borders in our world. And that's one of the fundamental differences is, you go down off of Hull Street and you rob a bank, Chesterfield County is going to be on you. You can't run a radio, but if someone in the Ukraine is is trying to hammer you, what are you going to do about it? Nobody there cares.
I'm not saying this needs to be a problem for law enforcement to solve. My point is I don't see a scenario where the way we're going, which is trying to fix all the issues, is going to solve it either. there's going to have to be something else, because I don't think it's, no matter what controls we come up with, somebody's always going to come up with ways around controls. Right? We haven't figured that out yet.
Consultants like me employed. I mean, don't stop me here.
I wanted to ask, going back to breaches, like full disclosure and reporting. I thought there's some laws that, you're supposed to report. Looks like, what are the consequences if you don't report in a certain time, or if you don't report full disclosure?
Yeah,
I think we never get to know.
I think the number of states is up to like 47, 48. There's only a handful that do not have data breach laws.
It's very rare that impacted individuals aren't notified, just to be fair at this point.
However, this is a presentation I did years ago. In reviewing those state laws, they give you a nice escape clause. You only have to report, certainly to the individual, if there is a reasonable expectation that data is going to be misused. That's a big hole that companies drive their cars through. Because remember,
in some states, that's definitely been dialed back.
All the letters that you get, it'll say, we don't really think that this data has been used for malicious purposes, right? And in a lot of the states, there's a loophole that big and doesn't get reported.
Because most of the time, you see the paper or this Target or whoever got breached 8 months ago or whatever, and now they're being reported publicly. So there has to be some.
So there is, and again, I would caution people to just assume that they're doing something incorrect. While there are state laws that require notification, there are superseding laws by law enforcement or associated with law enforcement that may often put that notification on hold. If it is part of an active investigation, for example, the DOJ will step in and say, don't worry about notifying, we're going to address this, we're going to focus on indictments, then you'll do the notification. Then you'll talk about it publicly, but don't say anything. Don't make an assumption necessarily that somebody's doing something incorrect. Their hand is often being guided by law enforcement.
Great.
Yeah, and I've worked on forensic cases that are still open that can't be talked about, but those happened a long time ago. So
it can take years sometimes for the DOJ to fully put together a case for indictment.
Sir in the black shirt, you've been waiting.
Yeah, going back so much to the Target issue and whatever, what do y'all think is secure? When we do credit, the chips, the Apple or Samsung pays or anything, versus the strip, which is very vulnerable.
I mean, I prefer cash, but.
That's fair.
Well, I think, all that stuff, it's not so much you carrying it around or the transmittal that always gets taken advantage of. In a lot of cases, it's the storage. So in many cases, that's out of your hands. I think if we did chip in PIN in this country, we normally don't. Because, think about it. You go to Target, you put your card in, and it's like, okay, what do I have to hit for credit? And that bypasses the PIN requirement. Okay. How different is that from the magnetic stripe? You can get a magnetic stripe reader off of eBay for probably less than $5. And I'm sure you can probably get a chip reader out of eBay for probably less than 10. So you, with your individual card or the near-field communication stuff, I'm not as worried about that, because there's no profit in an attacker trying to get your one number. Because, as soon as you figure out it's being used, your bank fraud's going to call you, they're going to cancel it. They're going to write the $50 or $100 or $1,000 off. One card, it wasn't probably worth it, assuming it even worked. But, if you've got a store of thousands of numbers, that's a worthwhile target. And, we, the consumer, don't have a heck of a lot we can do about that.
And working in PCI, we see a lot of different things there. We've seen some huge violations. We've seen companies that were storing full PAN, so full credit card data in the clear in servers, which is a automatic fail. And we've seen other stuff like that. But if you think skimmers, how long do you think it takes to install a skimmer on a chip reader?
10
seconds.
seconds. There's a video of a guy doing it in less than 3 seconds. So there's cash is secure. That is probably the most secure thing you can do. Everything else, it's really going to come down to, are you aware when you're going to use those machines? Because skimmers, I think, are a bigger problem than anything else when it comes to using cards.
So this is a question to the panel. So one of the keynote speakers, one of the talks from the keynote speaker yesterday, posed kind of a question about, how is your security organization viewed by kind of the internal business climate? Is your organization viewed as a hero or a villain? And that security presents kind of this character to the business, and that character is to say no. So how can we as security professionals kind of change that mindset and be viewed kind of as a sidekick, and that we're here to make your project safer? What can we do to change that mindset?
Great question. So are you a hero or a villain?
Depends upon who you ask.
When you look in the mirror, what do you think?
I see somebody who's going to the beach. So I would say for the most part, we're viewed as a hero at this point. There are always anomalies to that, but it's because we put the business first. And for those who saw my presentation, which I know you were in there, sometimes we make decisions that are insecure. We do that. We tell the business to do something that is not secure because we know it's the right thing for the business. We know it's the right thing for the company. And as long as they know that we're making those types of decisions and we can justify those types of decisions, the times that I tell them that they can't do something, they're more likely to accept the fact that I'm doing it from a reasonable perspective. So I teach practicality. And if you're practical, you're the hero.
Well said. That's not easy to do.
It's not, and it is a fine line. Sometimes you go too far one way or the other. We all do.
And that has a lot to do with individual, professionalism, credibility within the organization, the whole 9 yards. I would add a little bit in that, how do you change the perception? In other words, how do you perhaps get the business owner to view the risk that they're about to enter into in a manner in which makes sense for you to add a security control or something to protect the business. And the experience I've seen is I've got to be able to talk their language. If I'm talking to the CFO, I'm talking about reserving money. I'm talking about to the CEO, I'm talking about the brand tarnishment. So I'm trying to not just talk to them about, do you know I got 1,000 vulnerabilities I haven't patched yet? That doesn't mean anything, but you can kind of translate that up into the cost of a breach, the cost in terms of both direct and indirect. Then they get more on your side and are more attentive to you, is my thought.
I would change the course of talk to something else about cybersecurity skills gap. So I know you said you're on the board of the organizations. So here's a survey of ESG, annual survey. And you would think that, there's a lot of talk, there's a skills gap, there's a lot of openings and, openings or jobs. There's a difference between number of openings and jobs. But 2015, 42% of organizations report a problematic shortage of cybersecurity. 2016, the same thing was 45. 2017, 51. 2018, 19, 53%. So that skills gap is increasing. And so my question is, other than the folks that are in colleges who are coming out with all the latest skill sets, who probably can get a job easily, what about those individuals who are changing directions, who would like to go into cybersecurity or IT security, where they have a fundamental knowledge and background, but they just need a little bit of more. And the governor, the Commonwealth, especially in the last 5 years, I know they've been touting so many jobs. He's got some of the companies from California to come north of Grumman and things like that. But I just wanted to see what your perspective on how this gap can be narrowed. The survey should have been the other way around. You know, it's 42 to 53. Instead of that, I would think it should be 53 to 42. Then they say there is an effort, not just by the public partnership or the government or the federal agencies or what have you, considering the fact that, yeah, this is a big industry, there's a lot of opportunity. And I can understand you're in the business of vulnerabilities increase every day. That means there's more action, more activities happening. And the bad guy is always one step ahead. He has to be one step ahead, he or she.
Well, I would add a small, addendum to that claim. There's a gap of skills talent at the price people want to pay. Okay? So as somebody who gets recruited, so on average, get contacted by a recruiter about every 2 weeks. Okay? And some of the stuff is laughable. No, I don't want a 3-month contract job in Adak, Alaska.
I got offered that one.
Okay. That's just not me. So like I said, some of this stuff is laughable. Some of the stuff is, well, we want the moon, but we don't want to pay for that. So yes, there's a skills gap, and yes, I think from an industry training perspective, being able to get people in and train them up, I think we've seen some folks, some organizations don't seem to be very committed to doing that. Because one way that you can cure the gap is to train people. The industry I came from, healthcare, we had many of schools of nursing, in which if you came to us and you wanted to be a nurse, you wanted to be a radiology technologist, so on and so forth, we would basically give you schooling for free if you would agree to work for us for anywhere from 2 to 5 years, depending upon what the specialty was like. And then we went through a period of time where we had CEOs who managed by Excel. It was all about $1. And they went, man, we're losing our shirt at these schools. We should close them. We're not making any money with them. Okay. We closed them. We had one left. And then, months later, years later, they go, we're getting killed on contract nursing. So when a nurse is out, she's sick, she's on vacation, whatever, we have to get contract nurses in to cover that. We're required by regulation to have X amount of nurses per patient, blah, blah, blah. So we got to get contract nurses in. So we might pay a nurse $20, $25, $30 an hour, depending upon experience, specialty, stuff like that. The contract nurses would cost us anywhere from $50 to $100 an hour. So a significant cost increase. So we're getting absolutely killed by contract nursing. So what was the solution? Well, the solution was to spend $1 million in advertising to recruit 100 nurses. They set up a special 800 number to call. They bought ads in every paper from Portland, Maine to Miami. Okay? You know how many nurses they got? 60. Do you think that solved the problem they had? No. The person who recommended reopening the nursing school got fired. So is there a skills gap? Yes. However, it's somewhat of kind of our own making. And that's sad. And I hope they're going to fix it.
What's the lesson learned on that?
So hold on. We actually I want to hear his perspective because you talked about it a little bit, and then we'll wrap up. There's 1 more minute.
Yeah, so I am a career changer. I dropped out of high school when I was 16 and went straight into construction. Worked in construction for a while, fell off multiple things and broke a lot of bones and wasn't able to work in construction anymore. So I took an internship at a managed services company and did a lot of self-study. And I came to places like this, and I got involved with the community and made contacts and worked my way up relatively quickly, because I've only been working in IT for 5 or 6 years now total. And I think taking a look at career changers is a big thing, because they're usually the most self-motivated. The kids coming out of college might be doing it for the money. They might be doing it because their parents wanted them to go that direction. Career changers are doing it because this is the field they want to be in. So I think any hiring managers out there, look at career changers, take them seriously, and see their self-motivation, because there's a lot you can do with self-motivation.
Do you think that's happening?
I've seen it happen. Some of the most successful people I know are actually high school dropouts who made a career change into security,
Well,
at least on the offensive side.
And you have to be, organizations have to be willing to take that chance.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I would say there's a significant group of management who everything is about for them risk avoidance, and the risk of hiring the wrong person is a great one. They don't want to do that. It's
Yeah.
silly, but it's like
Short-sighted, for sure.
Well, and the funny thing is, red team. There's an awful lot of folks in the red team that's like, I don't care if you graduated high school. I don't care this. I don't care that. I want to know: do you have these skills? Are you motivated to keep learning? Yes, you're there. You're the man. And like I said, I don't see a lot of that in other parts of the IT fields, specializations, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think we should, because it's like especially if people have an outside view, they haven't always done IT, because it's easy to get locked into the way we've always done things.
Yeah.
All right, well, that is the end of our panel. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm sure our panelists will answer any other questions you may have.